Indiana now taking on an Iowa team that you mentioned earlier. That they're 0-3 in the Big Ten now, which is a little surprising, obviously. But they come back home to play Indiana. Indiana being off for this long time, weird scheduling because Iowa will play. I think this will be their third game in just over a week or whatever the period is. Indiana has not played in since last year. But and it's a late game at Iowa on the road. And I think that makes it even any easier for Indiana. You've got two teams that are both hungry and needing this win, but Iowa cannot go 0-4, and they can't do it at home. And that's going to be a tough game for Indiana to come out of there with a win.
It will. You've got what. There's a couple things that are in IU's favor. One, it was clear as they played through December first without Jalen Hood-Schifino and then subsequently without Xavier Johnson, that it was hard for them to find a formula when they had built everything around having the multiple point guards and attacking from both angles and really putting teams off balance, being able to do so many different things offensively. And also Xavier is a terrific on-ball defender when he puts his full concentration into it, which he had done for most of this year. So you needed some time to build something else. That they need to be a different team than they intended to be, because they don't know when. I mean, we don't know, and the suspicion is that Xavier will not be back for a while. So they need to be a different team than they'd imagined themselves to be. So that layoff did give them time to try to reconfigure what they are. And so I think there's an advantage there. If they were still out there, unless they, other than playing like a bye game in the middle of all that, that would give them a chance to roll it out and see how it looks in practice. I think it was good for them to have that time off. I do think that they, there could be a little bit of rust, but I think you look at a team like Iowa, and they are somewhat built to be a team that IU matches up well with, because they don't have the big post defenders to really bother Trace. And so you should be able to run some of your stuff through him that you like to run, that you were struggling to do against Armando Bacot and some others that you played. Excuse me. So I think it's a difficult assignment given the circumstance, because Iowa will be desperate. But I also think it's an opportunity.
Well, and you talk about the change Indiana forced, and Tamar Bates entering the starting lineup for Indiana. That change, it's going to be a different look that teams are going to have to see. It's going to be a different offense that teams are going to have to face, a slightly different style, because Tamar brings something a little different, and he brings something different to the offense. Hopefully something that loosens his offense up, because they have gotten stagnated, and teams have really kind of formulated a formula for how to defend Indiana while they had been going through this. But Tamar is one of those guys that gives you helps open the spacing back up a little bit, I think.
Yeah, if he makes shots, which, obviously his job, and it is a team now that takes the floor with multiple 3-point marksmen. That's their first job. That's their first skill. Obviously, Xavier is a quality 3-point shooter, but it's not his first. It's not even probably. It's probably third on his list of options when he's playing offense. His first is to get the offense started, and the second is to try to attack the lane. So this gives them, what a lot of teams have now, which is two guys out there with him and Miller Kopp that can space the floor, and with someone like Jalen who can attack the lane and see people. It gives them maybe again, Tamar has to make shots, and Miller has to keep doing it as he has for this entire season. But if that presents itself as a weapon, it does make IU, a dangerous offensive team, because obviously when you can space the floor, and that means you can get the ball inside to Trace and have more one-on-one opportunities. And if teams choose to double, they're leaving a shooter more often than not. And Trace is terrific. I mean, he is elite at passing out of the post. The problem that he's had in passing out of the post is that too often the ball hasn't been going to a shooter, so it doesn't really help that much.
Well, and I think too, Mike, the big thing that I wanted to see from Indiana with Tamar Bates is I think through the first 13, 14 games, we can acknowledge that Indiana has not been a fast starting team. It takes them a little while to find their footing. And I think Tamar Bates is a guy who can fill it up quickly. Now, that doesn't mean he's going to get 8 points in the first 4 minutes of a basketball game and suddenly Indiana's issues are going to be fixed. But I think that there's some optimism now that Mike Woodson was willing to tweak that lineup. And if Indiana can get off to better starts in some of these games and not have to dig themselves out of these holes, then I think that is a positive sign, because we've talked a lot on this show, and some people have said, if Tamar Bates is playing 30 minutes, what does it matter if he starts or he doesn't? But those first 4 to 6 minutes of a game, when you're trying to set the tempo, makes a big difference. And so to me, that's what I'm looking for. I know what he brings to the floor, but to me, I think his impact in those first 4 minutes can be so monumental for Indiana that it's going to be interesting, because as we've talked about, Indiana's had a couple weeks off here. They're going to probably have some rust, but I'm looking to see what he can do offensively and see if this team can get off to some better starts in some of these games.
One of the things that when people say it doesn't matter who starts, I point out that nearly all college basketball coaches in nearly every situation will start the same players at the start of the first half and the start of the second half.
Yeah.
And then they'll play them for roughly 5 minutes at least. So that's 10 minutes. How long is a game? 40 minutes. So that's a fourth of the game. It doesn't matter who's out there? Come on. That's a quarter of the game. Of course it matters. They have to be able to play together. They have to be able to click. They have to be able to be functional at both ends of the floor. It's essential that you have the right starting lineup. And now, that doesn't necessarily have to be your 5 best guys or whatever you mean, but those 5 guys, when you put them on the floor, have to be good together, or you're throwing away a quarter of the game. So yes, it definitely matters whether someone starts or whether they don't. Now, it doesn't mean that Tamar Bates should have been starting all along, or
right.
Because again, some of the difficulty in starting slowly is again traced to the absence of Jalen Hood-Schifino in the Rutgers game and some others, and now Xavier. So some of it is that they haven't been able to build that on-floor chemistry because they haven't had all their players. They spent from end of September all the way to second week in November, first week in November. They're spending all that time building a chemistry, building a formula. This is how we're going to win. And then all of a sudden, a month into the season, one of them's not playing. And it's like, okay, well, now we're a completely different team. It's like, you take a quarterback away from a football team and or the center away from the football team, or a middle linebacker away from defense, and everything changes. So I have some sympathy for Indiana because I don't think there's a team in the top 25 that's had 2 starters go down for multiple games.
Yeah.
I don't think there's another that has, and they have been able to at least hold their ranking. And there's what they accomplished is already on the board relative to things like the bracket I'm working on for Fox today. That doesn't go away, but with you missing a starter now for what appears to be an extended period of time, you have to become a different team than you intended to be, and you have to be successful as that team.